Before Dr. Noonan has to leave, if anybody has any questions for the professor specifically, you can just bring them up to the microphone right now. Any questions in general?
Yeah. Are we not in the middle of a scientific technological revolution that is replacing the Industrial Revolution? By that I mean big capital has smashed the Asian tigers that wanted an indigenous automobile industry. They smashed the socialist countries. I think we had freedom in 1991 in Russia. But a very important thing happened in 1999. Anybody know anything about long-term capital management? Anybody hear that? Okay, you have. A hedge fund with 2 Nobel Prize winners and a former head of the New York Federal Reserve Bank bet the overnight LIBOR rate in London against the federal rate in the United States, interest rates. At that moment, Russia defaulted on its bonds. And as a result, the long-term capital management owed a notional value of $1 trillion because they bet the wrong way on the interest rate spread. And they said, we have to bail out long-term capital, but we must never let it happen again. Well, it happened again in 2008. World labor markets that have castrated the labor movement. World capital that has overrun its capacity to keep the system going. So we're in a period of chaos. And I'll just finish with an example, a local example of how occupation has liberated people. Last January, some people were living quietly in their apartment building on Wyandotte Street East. Landlord didn't pay the taxes. So the city he didn't pay his hydro bills. The city had to cut his hydro bills. So the city cut the hydro. And those people were thrown out of their apartment building in the middle of January, their community, thrown out in the middle of January. And they had to take their kids and find another place to live. I ask you, would that happen today with this fledgling Occupy Windsor movement? I would say no. But it also points out we have to reach out. When we see injustice, like what happened last year in January, we got to move. Because if we're going to take on world capital, which is in complete chaos, because it's overreached itself, has no place else to go beyond the earth, we've got to reach out to the other occupation movement. We've got to reach out to the people in our community and start building to give them the same kind of confidence that guy that was an alcoholic that hasn't had a drink in the last week because finally somebody said, we're all in this together.
We try to keep it to a question because we don't want to waste too much time before Dr. Noonan has to leave. So,
just this question for Dr. Noonan. You brought up a good point of how everything is because of consumer products, and I tried to link that to what Hegel said in his theory of dialectic materialism, where everything is about.
Hegel's a dialectic materialist?
Well, then Engels first, and then Hegel. That's what I'm trying to say is, don't you think it has to do with the structure of how the individual thinks? It's basically, it's all about what we want and what we need, and any movement that what's happening right now, the problem is at the end they just want more of what's not necessary. That's my question. Do you think that's not the biggest issue? Is the problem is with the innate individual? That's a problem. It's all about material. It's all about what we want. It's all about we need that iPhone. We need that consumer product. And what's happening right now is just we lost that and we want it back. Do you think that's not the problem right now?
I think that's part of the problem, but to go back to your point about Hegel, I think it's dialectical. That is, I think that you can't isolate one factor and say this is the cause, that we have to look at individual psychology and motivation in light of the society in which we live. Why do people seek out satisfactions in terms of consuming gadgets and so forth? I think because kind of cooperative and effective relationships between human beings are difficult in a society where, as Alan was saying, one's survival from day to day, or as Mike was just pointing out, stress and tension, it creates serious problems for human relationships. Work for most people is simply a means of staying alive. It's not intrinsically interesting. These things, I think, contribute decisively to the human, to the individual's pursuit of satisfaction by buying things. So I don't think you can isolate individual psychology as an independent causal factor. It's part of the problem, but it's linked up with, I think, the loss of deeper connections, which is where meaning and goodness is ultimately found in life. But the type of society we live in makes it extremely difficult to find it, and so we search out substitute satisfactions, whether it's drugs, alcohol, consuming. That's certainly part of the problem, and the forgetting the difference between needs and consumer desires is a huge part of that.
Oh, and by the way, 47 million people need help to feed themselves in the States. Part of the problem, too.
Hi.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Hi. Do you think the strategy right now with them trying to close up the occupations all over or globally is because we're becoming effective? Or what message would you say that we should have to instill to ensure that regardless of a camp being closed down, we would have, we'd still sustain and grow, as you say, is necessary?
Well,
go ahead.
just to speak from the Detroit perspective, they've been so involved in direct action, they've become a community service almost. And if they get moved out of the park and can't find like another park, like you were saying before, it's going to probably develop to the next step. It has to be. Maybe it becomes organization, Occupy, dealing with social issues, dealing with protests. I don't know, but definitely, like you were saying there, there needs to be room for it to grow, and that you were saying as well. It's not simply just about occupying a park, I think.
Yeah, like what I have, it's like really what it is to a lot of people is a cultural shift. So it's not just that we're out there and we're occupying something now, it's just people are realizing that they can actually do something to try to affect the status quo, to try to actually work outside the standard political and economic institutions. So people are, the way they think about things is changing, and that's it's the same with the Arab Spring, same with a lot of other movements. It's like a permanent cultural shift that's happening and it's growing. So if we send that message, then that's a really good way to say that it's not going to go away.
As someone who's been participating in the Occupy movement, I have to say that I've learned a lot about how to do things in a way that is different from how it is portrayed to us in the media. Like individualism is highly glorified, that money is very important, and so on and so forth. The way we've been doing things in the camp is quite different from the way things have been dictated to us. But I have to agree with Jeff that if the gains of the Occupy movement are dependent on sleeping in the park, then it's problematic. Then what we have to do, as I think Mike is saying, is that we have to take these gains and move and use them beyond just the park. One of the hopeful things that I'm seeing coming out of the Occupy movement is this malaise that there's nothing you can do about it. This mantra that I keep hearing from people, well, there's nothing you can do about it. This seems to be melting away, that there's a sense now that you can do something about the injustices that you see around you. And I think that's one of the great strengths of the Occupy movement, the challenge perhaps for us is to remember that it goes beyond just the occupation. That we have to, what the great things that we've learned through the process of occupying need to be transferred beyond just the occupation, I think. If they close down a park, they don't close down Occupy. That's what I think. It's greater than just occupation.
My name is Hamid, and I've been involved with Occupy Windsor from day one, and I have so many friends in Occupy LA, Occupy London Stock Exchange, and Occupy New York City. Unlike the Tea Party movement, we don't want to put pressure on our current politicians to legislate in our favor, and we want to change the whole political and economic system. My question is, what are the practical ways for the Occupy movement, probably for the next 10 years, to achieve this goal?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things actually that May said was bang on. That is, to what extent can you bring what you've learned at the sites to a new sort of area of activity? I mean, to some extent, Occupy is a tactic, but also obviously it's also a way of living or modeling a different way of living and a different way of having social relations. So how do you continue to do that in a way that gets attention and continues to, in a sense, educate the community at large that there are alternatives, there are different ways of thinking about things, different ways of acting and relating to each other, as well as different ways of acting in political organizations, because that's obviously a key aspect. Most of us, many of us have been in community organizations of various sorts over the years, and I've seen them, of course, operate in some of the same ways that corporate organizations operate. In fact, they tend to get corporatized quite frequently. So one of the things I think that needs to be done is to try to sort of figure out a way of moving forward with the movement without sort of losing those features or characteristics.
Just picking up, I don't know what people should do for the next 10 years. That might be a little too long-term perspective in terms of politics, because it's very fluid. But I think at some point, and I think this is happening because there's supposed to be a kind of US-wide assembly happening, but at some point the question of political organization is going to have to be posed. I don't know in what form it's going to be posed, but at some point I think there has to be a discussion about how do you organize this as a political movement. Not to lobby politicians, but to actually insert yourself into the political power dynamics of the society. Because protest only takes you so far, right? I mean, at some point, to really transform a society, if that's what this is about, then the question of political organization has to be posed. I hate politics. I really hate politics. I would rather sit at home in my room and read poetry. I cannot stand politics. But you have to get involved, I guess. And I think maybe the period we're in right now is where things are being reimagined. So I think the best thing that the Occupy movement can do right now is to stay fluid and loose and let new ideas come to the fore. But at some point, the question of some kind of political organization is going to have to be posed, because that's how you ultimately make lasting changes.
So yeah, just to sort of take off of what they've said so far, I think just the existence of this movement and everything that it means, the fact that we're practicing direct democracy is in itself working towards the goal that we've set out for ourselves. We've reached the point where we sort of established ourselves and we've gotten that day-to-day survival down, and we need to, what I'd like to do over the next couple of weeks is start discussion groups and brainstorming sessions, planning meetings, that sort of thing, to try and figure out like what goals, what even like short-term goals do we have, and how do we work towards those long-term goals, and then from there, what long-term goals do we have, and then start working towards that. So, Hamid and others who've been asking that question for a while, I mean, I'll be hitting you guys up, and hopefully we can put something together.